So about 3 years ago, actually 4, I was just in this place in life where I wasn't super satisfied where I was. I feel like it was kind of a dark point in my life of just dealing with depression and not sure what was next. And I started getting just these dreams of what it might look like to start something new. And I was, at the time, I think I had worked one renovation job with my brother-in-law a couple of days, and I was like, oh, it's not that hard to work with tools, and like a lot of it is fairly repetitive. I think I could teach some of the guys at the group homes how to do this. And so started trying to think of like what that might look like. And so I started to talk to people. I was like, I have this idea of teaching woodworking to adults with disabilities. And a lot of people said that is not a good idea, that it's a fair amount of risk, and they didn't think it would work. So I found new people to talk to that thought that it might be a good idea. But in all fairness, I like a lot of a lot of the concern was probably real, and it's a lot of concern that I still had, but I still thought it might be a good idea. Partly because I think that there's an innate dignity of risk that we should embrace as humans, and so I'm allowed to take a lot of risks in my life and my own choices, and God gives that to me, and so we should give that to other people, even if they have disabilities. And so I thought, no, we can figure out how to do this. And really, if someone was willing to hand me a sander or a power tool, then anyone would be safer than me. So I go to the ER quite a bit, just in life. But yeah, so I kind of hit this point. I call it my Matthew 5 moment. But the idea of blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of God. And the idea, I love how Eugene Peterson puts it. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope, because with less of you, there's more of God and his rule. And I think I was at this point in life where I actually had nothing to offer. I had no idea how to run a nonprofit. I had no woodworking skills. And I just didn't have a lot of enthusiasm for life or something new, but I felt like God was planting this seed. And so it was very much, let's just see what doors are opened. Let's just see what God can do. And so I'll figure out kind of as I'm going through life and my work and just keeping on what I'm doing, having conversations and seeing what doors would open. And the first door that kind of opened was a grant to start a nonprofit. And so it's like, well, I'll write an application. And so probably the night before, maybe 2 nights before, I put together this grant application and I sent it in. And I got moved to the next stage of the grant. And so I was like, oh, now I got to start something, because they actually want to see, like, they want to come visit the site that doesn't exist yet. And so continued to have conversations, and one of the cool conversations that I had was with this nonprofit here in Hamilton called the Hamilton Tool Library, and it was a lending library for tools, which I didn't know was a thing, and it is. And so I was like, well, I'll start hanging out there and seeing if I can learn some woodworking. And so I would sit with my phone on the workbench watching YouTube videos, and then the tool, and being like, all right, let's see how this goes. And started learning just how to do woodworking. And so through that process, they then said, hey, we like this idea that you have. Why don't you use our space for free and run your first workshops? And so we launched into our first workshops, and that was the start of Restoration Project. And so it was these very small steps. It wasn't this like grand idea of kind of running a daily workshop or having retail items. It was just, let's start somewhere. And in that kind of idea of what I wanted Restoration Project to be, I knew that God had shown so much grace in my life, and so much was bringing so much restoration, and there was so many materials that were being thrown away that could then be turned into something new. And so I really wanted this idea of how do we take something old and broken that's been thrown away with a demographic of people that are overlooked and create something. And so to kind of meld those ideas. And so I started driving around picking up pallets. And so
Pick it up,
oh, yep, sorry. And so it turns out that pallets are thrown out a ton.
And what are pallets?
Pallets are used for shipping any kind of material. And so anything that's shipped gets put on a pallet and stacked high so that the forklift can come and carry it. Yeah, so they would like sit like this, and then you'd have a bunch of stuff on top of it. And so because they're used for shipping, and they're often used for heavy materials, they actually have to use fairly strong wood for them. And so they generally tend to be fairly strong wood, which is nice. And they look really crappy, but once you take them apart and plane them, so this is like something that we would make out of a pallet. And so we would take the wood and we would run it through a planer, and it cleans it all up, and then sand it and cut it into pieces and paint it. And so, I mean, two parts of me were very happy that this idea that we could reuse materials that were going to be thrown out, and they were free. So it seemed like a good business model, that free materials and a story behind them. And so that was really kind of what started shaping what Restoration Project was going to be. And so we use all or mostly reclaimed materials. Like paint is hard to find reclaimed. Although people throw it out a lot, so we do get some of it. But yeah, so we use mostly reclaimed materials to create all the items that we retail. And it's this neat, like, hands-on work that we get to do, but I get to integrate my faith into it. And so I get to take the narrative of restoration and the narrative of the God who restores and put it into our pieces. And so we make cutting boards. And you might have seen in the video, they were at the very beginning, there was like making a hole and sticking something into it. And so one of the things that we do with our cutting boards that we make, and so these are just scraps of materials that we get from like cabinet companies. And so we glue them all together and they make a cutting board. But I wanted, for a lot of our guys, I wanted them to understand that even though the rest of the world doesn't necessarily always see their value right away, that they have this innate value. And so that's known by God and known to God. And so we, with our cutting boards, we make a hole in them and we put a piece of scripture or some kind of redemptive quote. And so the idea with that, with our truth collection, is that inside each one of us is this truth that sometimes is only seen by the Creator. And so the creator of our cutting boards, they know the truth that they put inside, but no one else does. And so it's neat to see the guys kind of process and be like, oh, that's true of me too. And to integrate these pieces of faith into what we're doing in our day-to-day.
So you're saying in this cutting board, or at least another kind of cutting board?
No, this one has one.
Somewhere in there.
Yep, is a redemptive quote that I do not know because I didn't make this one. So.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. So it's fun to kind of take kind of creative parts of this faith and say, how do we apply this into what we're doing day to day that the guys can understand faith in a more tangible way.
Okay. Anything else just to sum up? Or
yeah, I mean, I might as well sum up the verse I picked because
yeah, for sure. Please
it's
do.
there. So
Gus is expecting a whole sermon on
sermon on 2 Chronicles.
And a specific word that's repeated several times through it in Hebrew.
Yeah, what did you say it was?
Well, there's a word before this passage.
Oh, well, that doesn't count then.
Yeah.
We're not interested.
I like to take things out of context and just work on just this passage. So, no. But talking about, 2 Chronicles is not usually where I go for inspiration. Sorry, Gus, but this today it is.
Of all the things in Chronicles, this is about the best verse you could.
All right, well, I feel good about that. But although most of the many people who came from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun had not purified themselves, yet they ate the Passover, contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, "May the Lord, who is good, pardon everyone who sets their hearts on seeking God, the Lord, the God of their ancestors, even if they are not clean according to the rules of the sanctuary." And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing as my call and the call of Restoration Projects is this idea that we're working with a demographic of people that often don't understand the rules of society. They often don't understand the way that the rules that are being put on them. And to be able to create this space that they're empowered and to be able to say, no, look, there's still value, there's still meaning, there's still purpose. And so to be able to do that in one context of employment, and so we're creating jobs for these guys where they don't fit into regular employments, but then to be able to have conversations with their families and them and be able to say, why don't you come out to church, and why don't you kind of learn more about the God that shaped what Restoration Project is, and to be able to, for me, to be able to cross over and be in leadership at a church that says, all right, you don't necessarily know how to do it the right way. Maybe you ate communion bread before I was serving communion, and now I have to go find more. But that's okay, because we'll figure it out and we'll do it. And so to be able to say that there's actually, that God can oversee the fact that we don't do it the right way, that his restoration is bigger than these rules and things that we put in place that sometimes people don't understand and can't fit into those systems. And so I think that is a lot of my heart for Restoration Project and for ministry to people with disabilities, is to say, oh no, even though you don't fit into the systems of society, that we can actually create a space for you, and whether that's in work or faith.